For the third time in a single year, reports from northeastern Mexico describe the discovery of ancient bones said to belong to a vanished race of giants, men and women who supposedly stood 9 or 10 feet tall. The Mexican giants were buried in a sitting posture in enormous stone urns. Skeletons of these men 9 feet high have been found near Progreso, Mexico. Their skulls and weapons are in the Smithsonian Institute in Washington. At Teotihuacan, several skulls recovered from the tombs were found to closely resemble those discovered in the burial mounds of the United States. Not only in size, but also in their distinctive flattening at the back of the head. He also observes that these skulls have high foreheads suggesting intelligence, but are flattened at the back in a curious way. Of sand and gravel, digging a few minutes, they unearthed 14 more skulls and a number of complete skeletons, all more than 7 and several over 8 feet tall. One of the skulls is remarkably well preserved, with all of the teeth intact, and show that the retreating forehead and high cheekbones of the Indian. When Sandoval, the Spanish navigator, sailed down this coast to Mexico in 1524, he discovered a supposed race of giants. In the state of Chihuahua, there have been discovered several human skeletons measuring from 10 to 12 feet in length. They were all found in one cave near Sonora. 3 skeletons, all more than 8 feet in height, found by J.L. Coker, Sonora mining man, and during the past 2 weeks has been visited by Mr. and Mrs. Shoup, the former an attaché of the Smithsonian Institute, particularly the skull, which indicated that the giant was of such abnormal size as to be beyond comprehension as that of a human being. Excavators uncovered what is believed to be the skeleton of a prehistoric giant. Historians of prehistoric Mexico confirmed that the first races arrived were giants who lived naked, with loose and disheveled hair. They ate raw meat from birds and wild animals, as well as fruits and wild plants, hunting birds with arrows and beasts with heavy tree branches. These giants were cruel, proud, and very fond of pulque. The Quinametzin's giants peacefully received the newcomers. According to Nahua traditions preserved in colonial-era codices, the Quinametzin were a race of giants who once inhabited central Mexico in a previous era. But is there any evidence of this ancient race of giants who once inhabited Mexico? That's what we're going to look into. What I'm about to share with you is about 25 reports that could corroborate the Aztec mythology. Deep in the archives of newspapers and even deeper in the codices of ancient Mexico, a persistent story echoes across centuries. A race of giants who once walked the valley of Anahuac. Hello everyone and welcome back to Cryptic Camp. My name is Mark. In today's deep archival dive, we're heading into Mexico and the American Southwest border regions to examine a remarkable collection of giant skeleton reports and the indigenous legends that surround them. These stories come from the Library of Congress newspaper collections, as well as other newspaper archive collections, conquistador journals, colonial codices, and local accounts spanning more than 4 centuries. Some may reflect sensationalism, measurement errors, or unusually tall individuals. Others align across independent sources in ways that are hard to dismiss. If you follow my channel, you know that I research a lot of archival giant human reports, and I've seen people in the comments section ask, if giants were real, how come there's no reports from Mexico or Canada? Well, I've been doing it long enough now to come across a good amount of reports from Mexico and thought that this deserves a video. And I've also come across a lot of reports from the border states like California, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and I thought today we could compare the stories and see if there's any correlations. All of the information I'm about to read comes from these archival papers, reports, historical websites, so don't shoot the messenger. I'm just relaying what I read. None of this is my personal opinion unless I specifically start stating my personal opinion. So let's get into the mythology. The Quinametzin are giants of a previous world age. According to the Nahua, traditions preserved in these colonial era codices such as the Codex Vaticanus A, also called the Codex Ríos, and the Telleriano-Remensis, these Quinametzin, sometimes spelled Quinametzins, were a race of giants who inhabited central Mexico during the previous cosmic era known as the Son of Rain, the fourth age before our own. These beings were described as being immensely tall and powerful. Some traditions credit them with raising monumental architecture, including the vast pyramid of Cholula, built according to one account by the giant Chihuahua. Teotihuacan, the city of gods, has also been linked in certain stories to these ancient giants or their cultural influence. These giants' end came dramatically. They were destroyed by a great earthquake, interpreted as divine punishment, or in some versions a flood for failing to honor the gods properly or for their hubris. Their downfall cleared the path for the current age of humanity. Now that's the version of the Aztec mythology of these ancient giants, but on this Aztec giant website, I also found a few other different versions. It's hard to know which one's correct, since the history of the Aztec was systematically destroyed, and so you got a few different versions, but basically they all pretty much say that the giants were from a different era before ours. So let's get into the archives, starting with one of the Mexican giant reports here. Reports from Mexico yesterday announced a remarkable discovery at Ixtapalapa, a town about 10 miles southeast of Mexico City. Excavators uncovered what is believed to be the skeleton of a prehistoric giant. Judge Romulo Luna, the district magistrate, has taken official custody of these remains, which are said to be nearly complete except for the missing skull. Judge Luna stated that once the search for the skull is concluded, the skeleton will be sent to the National Museum of Mexico, famed for its extensive collection of Aztec antiquities, for further examination. The museum has already arranged an investigation into this extraordinary find. News of the discovery has revived one of the ancient Aztec legends describing a race of giants who once inhabited the valley of Anahuac. The ancient name the early Mexicans gave to the region that now includes modern-day Mexico City. According to the legend, these giants, known as the Quinametzins, ruled the land in prehistoric times until they were destroyed by another mighty race, the Olmeca, who were themselves of great stature. Their demise, the story continues, came by a massive earthquake, interpreted as divine retribution on expression of the wrath of God. So this story is interesting because right here it says the skeleton was 15 feet high and it was missing the head. And then it also mentions that the judge took possession and it will be going to the National Museum of Mexico. So if one of you guys ends up at the National Museum of Mexico, ask them about the 15-foot skeleton that was donated by Judge Luna. Here's another interesting part of the story. It says that they were destroyed by the Olmeca, who were themselves of great stature. It kind of reminds me of the Titans and the Olympians from the Greek mythology. So is that a correlation, coincidence, or maybe it's just people who, the colonial Europeans, putting Greek mythology into Aztec mythology? I'm not sure, but that is pretty interesting if there is if that isn't something they added in. Okay, let's get into story number 2 I have prepared here. Toltec Legends of Giants, and this drink called pulque. I'll read the beginning here just so you know what pulque is. Pulque is prehistoric in the Central Plateau of the Mexican Republic. It can be confirmed that it was used by the earliest inhabitants of that region. Therefore, the legend of the beautiful Xochitl, which places the discovery of pulque in the 10th century of our era, is far too recent. Long before the Toltecs entered the Central Plateau, the Otomi people were already using the whitest drink to become drunk. Since then, the intoxicating beverage has continued to spread, and it caused the destruction of the Empire of Tolan and countless riots, murders, and other crimes, surely more numerous than the sands of the sea or the stars of the sky. Sorry, I forgot to mention, this comes from image 10 of La Prensa, San Antonio, Texas. This was a Spanish written article, and I had it translated into English. So, here it is, written in 1921. It says, Manoel, discoverer of pulque and the giants. Historians of prehistoric Mexico confirmed that the first races arrived were giants who lived naked with loose and disheveled hair. They ate raw meat from birds and wild animals, as well as fruits and wild plants, hunting birds with arrows and beasts with heavy tree branches. These giants were cruel, proud, and very fond of pulque, which they already knew how to extract from the maguey plant. The Quinametzins, giants, peacefully received the newcomers, which they're talking about human beings, and allowed them to settle in their lands, only to exploit them, imposing heavy tribute and harsh abuses. Eventually, unable to endure this any longer, the newcomers resolved to destroy them. They prepared a banquet, serving the giants all the pulque they desired. Once they were drunk and collapsed on the ground, they killed them all in a single day, thus freeing themselves from those intolerable masters. Some historians believe the Quinametzin were actually the Otomi, considered among the earliest known inhabitants of Mexico, who already had a capital by the 7th century near where Tolan later rose. The Toltecs may have built their city upon its ruins, becoming conquerors of the Otomi, who were described as barbaric and deeply given to intoxication. It is said that in the fields there is a small animal like a rat or a gopher that scratches the maguey plant with a spoon-shaped snout. From the scraped area, the sap begins to flow and collect. When enough accumulates, the animal returns to drink it. From this animal, the indigenous people supposedly learned how to extract the pulque. Whatever the case, even today, the sap is extracted in this way using large gourds, blah blah blah. Basically, it's this alcohol from Mexico, and the story goes on to basically say how it is the downfall of all these different people, even a god, Quetzalcoatl. The legend of Quetzalcoatl, the civilizer of the Toltec Empire, is also tied to pulque. According to tradition, he was born in the year 895, called our prince, son of Chamala, who conceived him by swallowing a precious stone. Quetzalcoatl became a great priest and leader in Tolan, known for his wisdom, penance, and rejecting of human sacrifices. He also discovered pulque and cacoa. His enemies, described as demons or rival priests, sought to destroy him. They tricked him into drinking the pulque, assuring him it would not harm him. After tasting it, he drank more, eventually becoming drunk. In this state, he abandoned his discipline, gave in to the pleasure, and fell into disgrace. Overcome with shame, the next morning he declared that he had sinned and could not cleanse his name. Filled with sorrow, he left Tolan, journeyed to the sea, and ultimately immolated himself. From his ashes rose his spirit, becoming the morning star Venus. This beautiful tradition is an allegory of Venus, its disappearance, its reappearance, combined with the moral lesson about the downfall caused by intoxication. So, here's the conclusion. The three legends of the discovery of pulque. Thus, from the legends of the early peoples of the Central Plateau, it follows that pulque was the ruin of the Quinametzin giants, of the god Quetzalcoatl, God, and of the entire Toltec Empire. Are these legends symbolic? Do they mean that pulque would destroy the current inhabitants of Mexico? Well, I think Mexico's got bigger problems to deal with, like all in right now. Pulque is probably at the bottom of their list, but I'm sure that doesn't help. But that was a fascinating story from a Spanish article, and I had to translate this entire thing into English to get all that, as you see. Even the Toltecs have similar legends as the Aztec, and they have these same mythologies of a race of giants. This next story is called The Myth of Giants, and basically, it's really long, but I'll try to get to the part about the Mexican giants. It said that for the third time in a single year, reports from northeastern Mexico describe the discovery of ancient bones said to belong to a vanished race of giants, men and women who supposedly stood 9 or 10 feet tall. And let me get that maximized here for you. And stories like these are not new. Half a century ago, similar claims were widespread across the United States. It says that basically in New York and New Jersey, there were claims of 20 to 30 foot giants, but they turned out to be mastodons in pretty much every case. But it does say that the story in Mexico is actually different. The Mexican discoveries, however, present a different situation. The bones found there are unquestionably human. Skulls have been recovered alongside them, and the human skull is unmistakable. Yet, anthropologists who have studied similar finds from the same region have found no evidence of a race of 10-foot humans. The error lies in the height is estimated from the skeletal remains. Inexperienced observers often lay the bones out on the ground in what appears to be the correct arrangement. The spine to the hips and the legs placed end to end beneath them. While this seems logical, it produces an inaccurate result, one that exaggerates the total height in a living human body. The hip bones from the horizontal structure like a basin, the leg bones, blah, blah, blah. It says that they laid them out wrong. This simple mistake can easily add significant length to a skeleton, the illusion of an extraordinary height. The explanation accounted for the previous discoveries in Mexico and almost certainly explains the latest reports as well. Prehistoric human remains have been found on every continent, some dating back to nearly 1 million years. While many of these early humans appear more primitive in form, there's no evidence to suggest they were any larger than modern humans. And this was my personal opinion on this. This is interesting because it argues against giants, but it says that the skeletal remains in northeast Mexico are legit, but they were just laid out incorrectly. So, if they were laid out incorrectly and you had a 9 to 10 foot skeleton and you laid it out correctly, that should only take away, maybe a foot of space? I can't imagine much more than that. So a 9 to 10 foot tall skeleton would still be 7 to 8 on the conservative side. So unless you just really had no idea and we're just leaving big gaps between all the bones, 9 to 10 feet tall, put in the correct order, would probably still be a very tall individual. So that was an interesting story. Now, moving on to the next one. Image 3 of the Harrison Press Journal, Harrison, Nebraska, May 17, 1900. Oh, quickly, I forgot. I wanted to try something out. I want to start marking these all down on Google Earth to see what we end up with. So that last story says they were from northeast Mexico, if I remember correctly. So let's go to Google Earth. It doesn't give... So this was the first story. Giant from... It said that it was just southeast of Mexico City. Well, nowadays, that's just part of Mexico City. Look at how massive that city is. Wow. Anyways, let's put another dot in northeast Mexico. So somewhere around here. Okay, northeast Mexico. We'll say up here. Okay, and that will be our number 3, 9 to 10 foot tall skeletons. Okay, let's just... Unfortunately, it doesn't give the name of the city. 9 to 10 foot tall. Okay, and we'll click done. I want to mark all these out. And then after we're done, we'll take a look at our map and see what shows up here. So, moving on back to our story here. So, this one is interesting because it gives a bunch of different accounts of giants in Mesoamerica. Image 3 of the Harrison Press Journal, Harrison, Nebraska, the 17th of May, 1900. It says, legends of Indian tribes in Arizona and northern Mexico teem with tales of a race of giants who once lived on the mesas. Scientists say that these prehistoric men were blah, blah, blah. Okay. This story I actually made a video about before. If you look on my page for the Grand Canyon giant, here's the part I want to get to. Travelers in Peru tell of monster human skulls found in Chancall, 30 miles north of Lima. Of this race of giants, a tribe lived on the island of Puna in the Gulf of Guayaquil. Their skulls and weapons are in the Smithsonian Institute. There you go, right there. Here you have Mexico. Yucatan Indians have a legend of the giant Navapache who tripped up belated travelers by lying down across the trails. The Mexican giants were buried in a sitting posture in enormous stone urns. Similar coffins made of clay have been found on the plains of the far-off Chaldees in Asia. Skeletons of these men 9 feet high have been found near Progreso, Mexico. Their skulls and weapons are in the Smithsonian Institute in Washington. Again, it says the same thing. The giant skeletons discovered by travelers from Arizona to Peru have the same average height. Their weapons and utensils are alike, showing that the tribe once hunted and ranged along the Pacific coast of the two continents. In the curious burial mounds scattered over the American continent, skeletons of giants have been found, sometimes reaching heights of about 8 feet in height. The skeletons of the women are usually about a half foot shorter. And then it goes on and on. So we got a few different things to add to our map here. So the first is Puna in the Gulf of Guayaquil, right? Yeah. It says, travelers in Peru tell of monster human skulls found in Chancall. So let's go to the map and put giant human skulls on Chancall, Peru. Oh, I just saw it. This is Chancay, but maybe it was a misspelling in the newspaper. That happens a lot. Okay. Okay, let's put right here giant human skulls. Done. Okay, now going back to our story, close this one. We got a few other ones. And then few miles north of Lima, of the giants, a tribe lived on the island of Puna in the Gulf of Guayaquil. So Puna in the Gulf of Guayaquil, tribe of giants. Puna. Let's see what shows up. The Gulf of Guayaquil. Let's look that up. Ecuador. Here we go. And this should be Puna right here. Puna. Ecuador. Yep, right there. Okay. Tribe of Giants. Got it. Okay. Let's see how the map's looking so far. Okay, now let's go back to a story. And then we have a Legend of Giants by the Yucatan Indians. So, Legend of Navapache in the Yucatan. Okay. Let's just put one here. Navapache Giant Legend. Okay. Got that. And then going back, the Mexican giants were buried in a sitting posture in enormous stone urns, which is interesting because over in, I think it's Laos, you can look it up. There's these gigantic stone urns. Maybe I'll show you here on Google here in a second that I don't think anyone really knows what they're for, but they're so massive. No one has taken them or destroyed them because they're just too heavy. So they still sit out in the middle of these like forests, and I don't think anyone really knows what they're for. Okay, Progreso, Mexico. Let's look for this. And what will the label be? It says, skeletons of these men 9 feet high have been found near Progreso. 9 feet skeletons. Progreso. Oh. Progreso is a port city on the Yucatan Peninsula. Really? Okay. So this could be it. And these are the 9 feet high, I believe. What's the label supposed to be here? Says skeletons of these men 9 feet high have been found near Progreso, Mexico. 9 feet high. And this is Progreso, Mexico, right? So 9 feet skeletons in urns. Okay. All right. So the map's starting to come along. And then it says the giant skeletons discovered by travelers in Arizona, Peru have the same average height. It says that they've been found in the burial mounds, and I can tell you I've found tons of the reports, so they're not lying, at least about the reports. Now, the skeletons is another story. And I think that's it for that story. Okay, so now we're going to go to the next story. Image 77 of the Evening Star, Washington, D.C., the 15th of November, 1925. See if this one gives us a location. Skeletons of Giants. From the Pittsburgh Chronicle-Telegraph, one of the most interesting of recent discoveries in Mexico is that reported by prospecting miners operating a new gold and silver mining district in the state of Chihuahua, according to one of the engineers who has reached Mexico City from the Sierra Madre range of mountains. Where the operations are being carried on, there have been discovered several human skeletons measuring from 10 to 12 feet in length. They were all found in one cave, being quite intact. The average length of the feet was 18 to 20 inches. The anthropological department of the Mexican government is planning to send a commission to investigate the discoveries. The investigation is expected to clear up the origin of the wonderful Indians of the state of Chihuahua. The skeletons were all found in the sitting posture, shoulders bent forward and arms resting on upraised knees, just like our last story said. But they said that these giant skeletons were found in a sitting posture in giant stone urns in Progreso. But here again, we have another thing to add to our map, Chihuahua. And it says that they were 10 to 12 feet tall. So let's go to our map. Let's go to Chihuahua. Chihuahua, Mexico. I wish it gave the name of the town. Fortunately, we got to work with what we got. Okay. close. How's our map looking? Boom, 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 boom. Giants everywhere. Yeah. Okay, interesting. So, another interesting story. Let's go on to the next one. Image 2 of the South Bend News Times, South Bend, Indiana, December 16th, 1930. Says Part 1. Scientists dig for a super race, seek skeletons of giants in graveyard near Sonora by Charles Holloway. United Press Special Correspondent, Soyopa, Sonora, Mexico. December 15, scientists composing an international archaeological expedition continue their excavations 20 miles north of here today in search of evidence of a race of Superman with the skeletal remains of 5 children, all more than 6 feet tall. The scientists changed the course of excavations to a spot where the skeletons of adults are believed to be buried. The remains of 3 adults 8 feet or more in height were discovered some weeks ago, and the excavations are being made in this locality. The additional discovery of the skeletons of children established the site as a burial ground used by ancient people who inhabited this vast wasteland in past ages, the same people whom the scientists believe will be found as a race of giants. Since finding the skeletons, Indians taken into the wilderness from here for excavation work have toiled unceasingly to bring to light remains of the heretofore mythical race of the Cyclops. Dr. Byron Cummings, head of the University of Arizona Archaeological Department, who is leading the expedition, expected to uncover other skeletons at any time. 3 skeletons, all more than 8 feet in height, found by J.L. Coker, Sonora mining man, several weeks ago, have been the incentive of the party to dig into the hardened ground for further evidences that might establish the fact that a race of large men and women roamed the North American continent. Pottery work and implements found in the graves already uncovered show the ancient inhabitants were highly developed artisans. So, I remember when I first posted this story to my Facebook page, Cryptic Camp, I did like a follow-up search to see whatever happened because it gave a lot of specifics. The Arizona Archaeological Department, the name of it says Dr. Byron Cummings, head of the University of Arizona's Archaeological Department, etc. So this is what I found. Maybe that was in a different story. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyways, I'll come back to that in a minute. I'm pretty sure it might be just the same story from a different paper, but there was a follow-up to the story. But let's write this down. Soyopa, Sonora, Mexico, scientists composing an international archaeological... Okay, so let's put that on our map. And it said that the children were over 6 feet tall and that 3 skeletons 8 feet in height. Okay, Soyopa. Okay. Okay, got that. Alright, going back to my script here. So, where was my next story? Now, this was the follow-up. Okay. So the follow-up to that story I just read in Soyopa, this is where I did a additional search. And, okay, I think I'll start right here. The burial trinkets and pottery are said to be finely made and of beautiful design. They are believed to be at least 2,000 years old. Such an expedition into the wilderness of Sonora is considered dangerous. Bands of armed Yaqui Indians are said to be hostile to outsiders. They patrol the region and are known to attack without warning. Scientists seeking to excavate the burial grounds are especially likely to arouse their suspicion as the land is regarded as sacred. Okay, for that reason, the expedition has kept a close eye. Basically, they were doing shifts where certain people would stay awake and stay on guard so that they didn't get ran off by the natives. And my additional search found some more information. Okay, they broke the story on the December 4th or 5th in 1930. Okay, the expedition, an international party was U.S. and Mexican scientists guided by Coker. It was organized by Dr. Byron Cummings of the University of Arizona. Was involved or consulted. They began digging what was described as prehistoric burial ground and reportedly found a 6'8" teen skeleton plus smaller child remains with plans to reach the adult graves. The pottery jars and ashes and intricate artifacts suggested that these people were not savages. Anyways, the Yaqui threat. The reports emphasized the danger from the untamable Yaqui Indians who viewed the burial grounds as sacred. What happened next? Okay, so this is all I've been trying to get to this whole time. December 15th, 1930, this is another article. A Progress Bulletin, Pomona, California story reported that the party had to flee because the Yaqui Indians destroyed or scattered the giant skeletons that they were excavating. On December 17th, 1930, a quick debunking appeared in papers such as Santa Paula Chronicles, San Pedro News Pilot, Bones Not Giants, they're just big Indians. Coker's claimed that an 8-foot average race was dismissed. These skeletons belonged to unusually tall but normal prehistoric Indians. No giant race evidence held up. The whole episode was over within about 2 weeks. No scientific papers, museum collections, or later excavations ever confirmed a race of giants in that Sonora burial ground. The bones were either destroyed, scattered by the Yaqui, or simply reclassified as large Native American remains. Common in that era when people were less familiar with the anatomical variation and newspaper loved giant headlines. So basically, the conclusion of that story was it was actually real, but they weren't a race of giants. They were just tall Native Americans. History could be so confusing. Who knows? Let's say there was a race of giants here at one time. Well, we know that we have Neanderthal genes in some humans. So who's to say we couldn't have possibly interbred with, these other hominids who were super tall? Like, for instance, they're finding out that certain populations have Denisovan DNA. So who knows? I'm not a scientist. I have no idea. But it does not argue that the bones weren't real. They did find, in fact, these very tall skeletons in the Sonoran Desert. Okay, this is one that I found. It's actually, I wrote an article about this on my website. This one could very well be one of those mastodon bones like that were reported. This very well might be from animal bones, and I could find the source article if I really wanted to, but I wrote it on my Facebook page and it's just easier to read it from here. Anyone who's interested, it's on my website and I list the source at the bottom of the page. This one, sensational discovery, skeleton of a 30-foot giant unearthed in Mexico. El Paso, October 2nd. Reports from Mexico City claim that the skeleton of a human figure exceeding 30 feet in height has been unearthed near the small town of Nicacampipa in the state of Veracruz. Newspapers in the Mexican capital are calling for immediate formation of archaeological expedition to investigate the site and recover any additional rare fossils. The find has stunned local residents, with hundreds gathering at the location to venerate the remains as a divine relic. Experts in El Paso familiar with the region note that this part of Mexico, particularly the Yucatan Peninsula, has long yielded intriguing puzzles for scientists and historians. For instance, the Yucatan is home to the massive tree measuring 45 feet in diameter, which a German researcher once estimated to be around 6,000 years old. Ancient stories bearing hieroglyphics have also been found there, showing striking similarities to those of ancient Egypt. Yucatan's indigenous peoples preserve a legend of a bearded, fair-skinned man who arrived long ago to teach them religion. Some scholars speculate that this figure could have been St. Thomas, one of Christ's 12 apostles. It is further reported that these natives used the cross as a symbol long before the arrival of the Spanish conquistadors. Drawing on this historical records from Mexico and Spain, some theorists propose that the Yucatan was colonized by ancient Phoenicians from Egypt, even prior to their settlements in Spain. How such a transatlantic voyage was accomplished remains a mystery, though proponents invoke the legend of Atlantis, the lost continent, as a possible bridge across the ocean. Well, that story was interesting for a few reasons. Now, a 30-foot skeleton, that one's harder to believe, but you never know, so who knows. The other parts that are interesting, it says the Yucatan indigenous people preserve a legend of a bearded, fair-skinned man. I've heard that before, but I've also heard that might have just been the Europeans adding their bits and pieces to the legends of the natives of Mexico. I don't know, but it is said that the natives don't grow beards, or they didn't. And also, it talks about this giant tree. I want to show you this thing. This thing is huge. Giant tree, Yucatan, Mexico. I looked up images of this thing before. This is freaking nuts. Let's see. Look at this thing. Is that my picture? I don't think so. The walking trees of Mexico. That thing is absolutely massive. Look at that. There's the people right there. People takes about, here's the size of a normal tree, that little piece right there. This is freaking huge. It said a German researcher estimated that these were about 6,000 years old, which is pretty fascinating. Okay, so let's continue on. Okay, so the next story comes from the Daily Morning Times, Volume 5, November 24th. And then it says 4th of August, 1881. So maybe it was between it. I don't know. Basically, 1881. Mexican Antiquities. And I wanted to read this story to you because this is really fascinating. The end mentions some interesting things that were found by a guy who did excavations at the pyramids in Mexico. So, 19th century account claims Teotihuacan predates the Aztecs and shows cultural links to North American mound builders. This morning I had the good fortune to meet with Captain Havana, who has been sent here on a scientific mission. He had just returned from San Juan, Teotihuacan, bringing with him a collection of Toltec relics and other antiquities that he believes belong to an even earlier civilization. Under an agreement with the Mexican government, these objects are to be placed in the National Museum in the city. After conducting a thorough examination of the pyramids of the sun and the moon, Captain Havana began excavations at the site of the ancient city of Teotihuacan. The ruins consist of vast accumulations of stone and debris spread across nearly 20,000 small mounds, which once formed the foundations of dwelling houses. Evidences strongly suggest that the city was destroyed by fire, as large quantities of charcoal and ash have been found within these mounds. That's kind of interesting. It reminds me of a story I just did in Arkansas where thousands and thousands of mounds were found in southeast Arkansas. Lamar Fontaine theorized that it once was a city that if 5 people per mound, a population of 11 million people. And inside these mounds, he said that they were dwelling houses, and they found evidence of fire, ash, bones from turkey, deer, bear, and fish. And it's just kind of interesting. Anyways, one excavated structure measured approximately 140 by 120 feet. The interior walls were coated with a stucco of vivid red hue, though exposure causes it to fade. Decorated with intricate designs, a fragment shown to me displayed a striking blend of crimson and white, interpressed with mica or powder quartz, which must have caused the interior to shimmer brightly in the light. You may recall that when Mr. Charney conducted excavations at Teotihuacan about a year ago, he reported discovering layers of stone pavement that he interpreted as evidence of 3 distinct periods of occupation. Captain Havana, however, strongly disagrees with this conclusion. He explained that careful excavation convinced him these so-called strata, sometimes only 2 feet apart and in other cases separated by as little as 6 inches of earth and pebbles, are simply foundational layers upon which the city was constructed. Beneath these layers, he discovered several sepulchres. Some contain human remains interred in a manner similar to those found in the burial mounds of the United States. Along these remains were pottery vessels, likely used to hold food offerings for the dead, as well as tools and implements made of obsidian. Last week, Captain Havana also examined the Pyramid of Cholula. Contrary to previous descriptions, he insists that the structure is not built upon a natural hill, but it is entirely artificial, composed of adobe, stone, and accumulated debris of an earlier civilization. In our conversations today, as in previous occasions, Captain Havana expressed the opinion that the Aztec civilization has been greatly overestimated. He suggests that many monuments commonly attributed to the Aztecs, such as the calendar stone, may in fact belong to the Toltecs or to an even more ancient culture, which is interesting because I believe the Pyramid of Cholula is actually 3, maybe even 4 pyramids on top of each other. So you got the outside, which I don't think it's still excavated. It still looks like there's grass covering it, and there's actually a Christian or a Catholic church up at the top. Underneath that pyramid, there's another pyramid. It's like those Russian nesting dolls, and underneath that pyramid, there's another pyramid. I believe there's at least 3 pyramids underneath the Cholula pyramid, which is crazy. So his theory that it might be older than the Aztecs is not that wild. And then he says the most interesting part here to me. He says, at Teotihuacan, several skulls recovered from the tombs were found to closely resemble those discovered in the burial mounds of the United States, not only in size, but also in their distinctive flattening at the back of the head. Captain Havana also noted that much of the pottery, particularly circular dishes, bear a striking resemblance to artifacts found in Arkansas. From these observations, he proposes that the Toltec civilization may have been influenced or even overrun by peoples migrating from the north, as well as groups from Central America. He pointed to various indications of contact between these cultures, noting that the discovery of obsidian implements in the burial mounds of the United States, where the material does not naturally occur, suggests long-distance exchange or communication between these ancient peoples. Remember, this paper is pretty old, so back in 1881, when it was written, they probably weren't aware of obsidian occurring in the United States, but I'm sure there is places where you can find obsidian up here. I doubt the only source of it was from Mexico, but I know that it was used by the Mesoamerican people a lot down there. So it's possible it came from down there. Another interesting thing, I just made the connection while I was reading it. It says that the pottery, particularly the circular dishes, bear striking resemblance to artifacts found in Arkansas. If you just saw, I think I'm on part 4 now of Ancient Mysteries of Arkansas. And in videos 1, 2, and 3, I covered mound-builder sites, and the Lamar Fontaine story was super interesting because there are thousands of these mounds all over southeast Arkansas, and they're called pimple mounds nowadays. No one knows what they are. They think the theory is basically that there's some natural process that happens to the land. All different types of theories have been proposed, gas mounds, different things. But according to Lamar Fontaine, they did excavations in some of these mounds, and they found evidence of human habitation. They found evidence of fires, animal bones, things like that, pottery, and the fact that this guy says there's a striking similarity in pottery found at Teotihuacan in Arkansas is super interesting to me. The most interesting part of the story is this part. Several skulls recovered from the tombs were found to closely resemble those discovered in the burial mounds in the United States, not only in size, so obviously there's something different about the size, or else they wouldn't mention that, but also in the distinctive flattening of the back of the head. Now, I have come across article after article after article of burial mound excavation reports from the United States that say that they found these really strange shaped heads in the mounds. When you go to look up images of these strange shaped skulls, you cannot find anything. I don't know why, but there is report after report of strange shaped skulls. And then here you have this guy who references the strange shaped skulls from the burial mounds in the United States, saying they look similar to the skulls found at Teotihuacan. Well, you can't find any images of strange shaped skulls from the burial mounds here, but let's look up some from Mexico. Okay. The woman with the elongated skull and encrusted rock tooth. Okay. Her head does look kind of strange, but I guess somehow there's like an ancient dental implant where they used a tooth. Okay. Alien-like skulls excavated in Mexico. And it mentions in this story the flattening of the back of the head. This kind of, I guess you could say that was flattened, but it's definitely elongated. Looks very strange. Where was this one found? Although cranial deformation and dental mutation were common features among the pre-Hispanic populations of Mesoamerica and Western Mexico, but scientists had not previously seen either in the Sonora of the American Southwest. Interesting, because we have a giant skeleton report from the Sonora in my script here, and I guess this one was found in Sonora as well. The practice of deforming, blah, 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 cemetery discovered by residents of the small Mexican village of Onavas in 1999, where they were building an irrigation canal in the first pre-Hispanic cemetery found in northern Mexican state of Sonora. Let's look up where this is. This could be interesting. Wow. Pretty close. Okay, look at this river right here. Bet you that's the same river. Yep. Okay, so this is where our 8-foot tall skeleton and children were found. And let's just mark this, even though it wasn't part of my script. Elongated skull. Very interesting. Okay. very cool. Okay, going back to looking at these elongated skulls. I know there's other ones that have been found. As a matter of fact, there's this other burial custom that have been found in the burial mounds of the United States, where people were placed in circles with the tallest individual in the center, and the rest of the people were placed around like spokes of a wheel. And I have found before where in Mexico, they have found the exact same type of burial. It's really interesting. I'll actually show it to you. Okay, let's move this over here. Okay, here it is, right here. Digs and Discovery, Circle of Life, Archaeology. Okay, so these same type of things have been reported in the burial mounds in the United States. And I believe at least one of these had a elongated skull, if I remember right. It's kind of hard to see where I'm looking at right now. But that's interesting because there seems to be a similar burial practice. Not claiming there's any connection there, but it's possible. Now, going back to what I was looking for. Teotihuacan was attributed to they think the Aztecs made it, but I believe the Aztecs say it was there before they arrived. Deformed skulls and ritual beheadings found at Maya pyramids in Mexico. Look at that skull and that skull. Some reason it's cracked where the eyes are. According to this, they were beheaded, but those look like strange shaped skulls. Anyways, this article says that the flattening of the back of the head of these heads from Teotihuacan. I wish I could find an image of what he's talking about. It's probably in the museum, the National History Museum of Mexico, I bet. This is the woman with the stone tooth. I've seen that now a few different times. What is this one? 2,000-year-old Peruvian warrior skull shows metal fusion. I actually have I believe I have a report later on in my story of a skull just like this where they performed basically a brain surgery in New Mexico. But what's this? Teotihuacan, an enigma enshrined in stone. Most of the remains of those young male warriors. These warriors were buried with obsidian spears and necklace made from human jawbone, the jaws bones of victims, perhaps. This mass ritual burial, which appears to have coincided with the time of the temples was built about 200 AD, suggests that a mass sacrifice took place as a show of power. That is a strange shaped skull. Look at that. That looks weird. Now, I don't know if that's from Teotihuacan or not. Usually an article will say right underneath a caption about the image, but I would imagine the story is about there. So, anyways, you get the picture. Unfortunately, these images are hard to find. What's this one? Head binding in elongated skulls found in Mesoamerican culture. That one's freaking weird looking. Teotihuacan era tombs with 47 miniature vessels uncovered in Mexico. I suppose you could say that's flattening in the back of the head. It does look different. Archaeologists have uncovered Teotihuacan era tombs in Mexico near the town of Ignacio, Zaragoza in the Tula region, revealing 8 human burials alongside 47 miniature ceramic vessels. Interesting. That does look weird, but it's not part of my story, so I'm going to continue on, but I would love to see images of these skulls that were flattened in the back from Teotihuacan. If you know where they are, drop them in the comments section or drop me a link so I can see it. Ancient elongated skulls from Peru and Bolivia. Update on the genetic analysis of the Procus skulls. Now, that is the holy grail of the elongated skulls. Something weird was happening in Procus. Some of those are just monstrous. I don't even understand how cranial elongation would change the shape of your jaw. Some of these jaw bones are freaking monstrous. Anyways, like I said, if you know where these images of these skulls are, drop them in the comments. I'm going to move on to the next story. This one I thought was interesting because look at this. So you got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's hard to count from where I'm at because of the camera and the microphone and everything. I was watching this video the other day, Carl Monk, and he talks about the code, and basically he claims that these pyramids, or at least some of them, have ancient knowledge encoded in them, and something like the level of terraces might indicate something. It's some type of math equation, but I thought these look pretty similar to burial mounds in the United States. Los Guachamontes in Jalisco, Mexico amazes with its unique circular stepped pyramids. Concentric designs are rare in Mesoamerica. The Teotihuacan culture built them about 2300 to 1500 years ago, featuring central altars, platforms, ball courts, and rituals likely honoring the wind god, inspiring today's Voldar dance. Mound-builder comparison. Like North America's massive earthen mounds, Hopewell geometric earthworks in Ohio, 2,000 to 1,600 years old. Look at the timeline. 2,300 to 1,500 years ago, they were making them in Mexico. And the Hopewell, 2,000 to 1,600 years ago in Ohio. Or Cahokia's flat-top monk's mound, 1,100 to 700 years ago. Both showcase huge, labor-intensive ceremonial centers by indigenous peoples without metal tools or wheels. Los Guachamontes uses stone for round pyramids. North American ones are earth-built, often square, parallel, genius across the Americas. I thought that was interesting. Not only are they similar, but they come from a similar time period. But it is thought that all of these were independent. There was no communication or shared knowledge. These were just all independent groups of people. Now, the last part I wanted to show you here is this map. I posted it on my Facebook. This is a map created by, I forget the name of the person who created it, but they have mapped out a bunch of different giant skeleton reports from Mexico. And obviously, they have a lot more than I do, but I have a decent amount. And as you can see, they go down into Guatemala, the Yucatan. Okay. Oh, look it. See that thing right there? On the key, this is those circular burials I was talking about. You can also see some have been found in Florida. They were found all over the United States, but these circular spokes of a wheel burials have been found in Mexico. Yet these were supposedly independent ideas. They just kind of came up with the same idea somehow, independently. That's what we are to believe. And then here's South America. You see in Peru, this one represents elongated skulls. I'm not sure what the orange does, but these are 7-foot tall skeletons or taller. Some over here, even in Brazil. I'd love to see those reports. I wanted to show that to you, but now we're going to move on to some of the other giant reports that I found in the United States that border Mexico up around this region. So, let's start with California. Oh yeah, but really quick, let's go back to our map and add to our map for that last story. Okay, found it. Let's add here. Alright, strange flat skulls, Teotihuacan. Alright, was there anything else from that last story? Oh yeah, and then that Mexico sensational story of a 30-foot skeleton. Okay. Let's put here 30 foot skeleton. Okay, got it. Because I couldn't figure out where that Nika Campipa is, but it's probably a misspelling. All right, anyways, we got that onto our map. Now we're going back to our border states. Continuing on with giant reports. Here's one from the Black Hills Union, Rapid City, Pennington County, Dakota, South Dakota, January 27th, 1899. 8 skeletons unearthed. San Francisco, January, looks like 20-something. Contractors employed in government construction work on Goat Island unearthed 8 skeletons. It is a mystery how they came here. The skeletons are of enormous proportions, few being less than 6 feet 6 inches long. Okay, let's look up Goat Island, and enormous skeletons will be the label. Goat Island. Yerba Buena Island. Maybe the name has changed. That happens a lot too. I'm looking for Goat Island. Trying to figure out. The California, formerly known as Goat Island, is now called Yerba Buena Island. Okay, so Google Maps was right. It is basically right in the middle of the freaking bay. Look at that. Is that the Golden Gate? No, can't be. Is it? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's San Francisco. Wow. Right out in the middle. Okay, so we'll name this Goat Island Giants. Okay, done. Got that. Going back. How does our map look? Map's coming along. Okay. So now down to the next one. Stanford. Oh, this was a good one. So, giant skeletons discovered in prehistoric village south of San Francisco, Stanford University, California. Recent excavations have revealed that the peninsula south of San Francisco was once home to a race of people of unusually large stature. Professor Harold Heath of Stanford University's zoological department announced last week that his team had unearthed several skeletons of men of exceptional height about 2 miles south of the university. The discoveries were made at the site of the prehistoric village that once covered nearly 2 acres. In addition to the giant skeletons, the party found stone hammers, bone owls, and ornaments that show that the inhabitants had reached a surprisingly advanced level of craftsmanship and civilization. So let's put that on our map now. The peninsula south of San Francisco. So, unusually large stature. Let's go to San Francisco and look for the peninsula south of it. Pretty close to Goat Island, huh? South of, what peninsula? South of, maybe this? I don't know, but somewhere south of San Francisco. Let's just put it right here. Skeletons. Okay. Stanford. Oh, here's the actual paper for that one, the source of that story. The Evening Times, Grand Forks, North Dakota. See if this one gives any better information. It was from 1912. That the peninsula south of San Fran was once inhabited by a race of giants. Harold Heath, Department of Stanford, according to the statement, it's given out last night, unearthed about 2 miles south of here several skeletons of men who were of unusual height. The prehistoric village covering nearly 2 acres has been found. So I don't know if that's 2 miles south of there, but maybe they were talking about that or that or that. I'm not sure, but we're in the ballpark, so that it's all good. All right. Going on to the next one. Here's another one from San Francisco. This one was from 1903. So this one was before the Stanford story. Okay. Finds giant's bones in a mound. Captain Newton H. Chitin makes discovery of skeleton of prehistoric man. Berkeley office, San Francisco, California, 2148 Center Street, December 30th. Captain Newton H. Chitin, the explorer and lecturer, has proved the theory that he has held for some time, that this neighborhood was formerly the home of giants by finding the bones of these species. Captain Chitin refuses to reveal the burial ground of this prehistoric man, but admits it is somewhere in one of the old Indian mounds of West Berkeley. Gotta remember that for here in a moment. The bones found by Captain Chitin make almost a complete skeleton, the missing parts being a number of the vertebrae. The thigh bones are large and measured by present-day standards indicate that the owner of them must have been a man at least 8 feet high. Half of the skull is gone, but the half that remains showed that the head must have contained about twice as many brains as that of the modern man. This skull is like one found several years ago in West Berkeley when excavations were being made for the foundation of a building. I have no doubt, said Captain Chitin, that ages ago giants roamed around this country. This man was no monstrosity such as we occasionally have nowadays, but a perfectly formed man and possessed of great intellectual powers. I intend to continue my investigations in the hope of finding more of the bones of our ancestors. Captain Chitin will present the skeleton at Berkeley High School. So apparently, if you have gigantism, you're a monstrosity. That was really interesting. Okay, so it said that one of them was missing half the skull. Well, that was interesting because some of those strange skulls we were looking at in Mexico, the head was cracked in half at like the eyes. So I wonder if it was something like that. Wow. Really interesting story because it mentions another report, but it says that they don't think these people had gigantism, but they were perfectly healthy people. And they are our ancestors. So let's look in West Berkeley on Google Maps. The head must have contained twice as many brains as the modern man. The skull is several years ago. So the foundations for a building, they found another one. The thigh bones are large. Measured present-day standards indicate that the owner of them must have been at least 8 feet tall. Okay, so West Berkeley. Let's look for Berkeley. Berkeley, California. He said in one of the burial mounds in West Berkeley. So there's Berkeley. West would be over here somewhere. Absolutely covered by cement. So let's just drop it right here and we'll say right there. Look at that. That landmass. Even the one in the middle, this one. It is coming along. Very interesting. Okay, and moving on to our next story here. This one comes from the Tulum Independent. November 14th through 11th of July, 1908. Find skeletons of a giant race. This is a really good article. You're going to like this one. So, what is believed to be the burial ground of the giant race which inhabited these shores before the discovery of California by Cabrillo has been found by Jacob Stoneberger and Robert and William Derbyshire of Santa Monica. On the beach of Malibu Ranch, where they were camped, the party observed a skull protruding out of the ocean's shelving bank of sand and gravel. Digging a few minutes, they unearthed 14 more skulls and a number of complete skeletons, all more than 7 and several over 8 feet tall. A large collection of heavy stone mortars, pestles, utensils, and various kinds, and arrow points were dug up nearby. One of the skulls is remarkably well preserved with all of the teeth intact and show that the retreating forehead and high cheekbones of the Indian. When Sandoval, the Spanish navigator, sailed down this coast to Mexico in 1524, he discovered a supposed race of giants, and Cortez 13 years later made search for them. It is against the wishes of Mrs. Ridge, owner of the Malibu, to disturb the remains, and unless her consent is obtained, the true story may still remain a sealed book. Now, that is a fascinating story. Now, we got to plot all of this out on the map, but first thing is, I made an article one time called The Giants of Old, where I gave all of these old European giant reports, and a bunch of them were from the first European explorers who came to the Americas in, the 15, 16, 1700s. And many of them, so many of them, reported coming across a race of giants or very tall natives in the Americas. Explorers, too, told such tales. In 1615, Dutch navigator Jacob Le Marie, sailing near South America, wrote that his crew uncovered graves containing skeletons between 10 and 11 feet long. This echoed rumors of the Patagonian giants that captivated European sailors for centuries. Travelers often reported strange remains on the island of, which I'm just going to spell out because I know I'm going to butcher this name, Tenerife, Tenerife. In the Canary Islands, the Chevalier Scory claimed to have seen a skull belonging to a native Guanche with a jaw full of 80 teeth. The body, he wrote, must have been 15 feet tall. Did he exaggerate or mistake animal bones for a human? That is difficult to say, but the account survives as part of the giant tradition. Go look up that video. There's a bunch of reports in there, and I've heard many others. Like, for instance, the rumor is that Patagonia was named by Magellan or his crew, and it supposedly means Bigfoot after the large natives they met there. There's actually pictures you can look up online. I'll show you real quick. Look at this. This is supposedly what they encountered. Supposedly they tried to kidnap some of these and bring them back to Europe to show people in Europe, but they died while on the boat. And I think there's another story too where they tried to kidnap one, but they were unsuccessful and basically got ran off. Look at that. If that is true, supposedly these were a race of giants they encountered in Patagonia. The guy comes up to about just above the navel. So that would be a really, really tall guy. Anyways, going back to our story, we need to mark this on the map because I had never heard of this guy. It says that Sandoval, when he came down the coast of California in 1524, he discovered a supposed race of giants. So let's write that down. Got it. And back to our story. Beach of Malibu Ranch. Let's look that up. There's a Malibu Ranch retreat, but I'm pretty sure it said in the sand. It's got to be on the coastline, right? Let's go back here. Where they were camped, the party observed a skull protruding out of the ocean's shelving bank of sand and gravel. Yep, so it's on the ocean. Dig in a few minutes, they unearthed. Okay, so let's just go to Malibu Beach. Let's try that. Okay. Here's Malibu. Wonder how far it goes. Does it reach all the way over here? Man, California's huge. Alright, we'll just put it on the coastline. Basically there. And the description again was what? A number of complete skeletons, all more than 7 feet, several over 8. So 7 to 8 foot tall skeletons. Okay, got it. Okay, so one way down there. Got it. That's where Malibu is. Okay, cool. All right, that was a good one. I think that's it for it. It says that it's against the wishes of Miss Ridge, the owner of the Malibu. What does that mean? Was that the name of the business? I don't know. It would be nice to get more specific with it. Close enough. Okay, moving on to the next story. Now we move into New Mexico. Okay. This one comes from the San Francisco paper, January 20th, 1902. Delvers find giant bones from New Mexico comes a wondrous story of a skeleton. East Las Vegas, New Mexico, January 19th. An archaeological find has been made on the Mesa Rica near Chempento, this county. It is the skeleton of a prehistoric man. Legend has it that the vicinity of the Chempento and the Mesa Rica was peopled by a race of giants centuries ago. Evidence to substantiate this tradition was found on the ranch of Don Luciano Quintano. 5 men several days ago began to excavate at a place marked by 2 pieces of rough-hewn white building stone about 15 feet apart. They had dug about 5 feet between the stones when the skeleton was unearthed. The bones are well preserved. The giant's chest measurements could have been no less than 8 feet. The lower jawbone is all that remains of the head. It is a massive peeve, and in it is a huge tooth. The forearm measured 3 feet, and the length of the arm must have been about 6 feet. The skeleton will be sent to the Archaeological Society of Santa Fe. Now, to me, this sounds like a mastodon skeleton. That's just 8 feet across the chest. But it says that it was found in a building, or a stone building. It says, began to excavate a place marked by 2 pieces of rough-hewn white building stone about 15 feet apart. They had dug about 5 feet between the stones when the skeleton was unearthed. I don't know. This one's confusing. That just sounds way too big for a human. 8 feet. We'll mark it just in case. Mesa Rica, near Chempento. Okay, I guess this is it. Alright. It's massive and it had a huge tooth. Yeah, that really sounds like a mastodon to me. The skeleton will be sent to the Archaeological Society in Santa Fe. Let's double check the location. Where's Chempento? That's over here. That's not very close, is it? I guess it's not too far. Okay. Anyways. Possible giant, likely a mastodon. Okay. Got it. Alright, moving on to the next story. Now, this one's really interesting. Okay. New Mexico giants with double teeth. The vanished race. The Reverend Dr. George H. Cole has returned from an expedition to the ruined cities of the southeastern Colorado and New Mexico, with a remarkable collection of relics from the vanished race of the cliff dwellers. His most valuable discoveries came from excavations in the ancient communal dwellings near the Santa Fe River. About 14 miles from Espanola, New Mexico, the site, which has not yet been named, it is said to be the largest pueblo discovered in the United States, and Dr. Cole was among the first people to examine it with scientific interest. Among the objects recovered were stone tools, rare pottery, human bones belonging to people whose teeth were all molars or grinders. Kind of sounds like an elephant, or a mastodon again. One burial yielded the femurs of a woman measuring 19 inches in length, leading Dr. Cole to conclude that she may have stood at least 7.5 feet tall. The ruins stand on a great isolated cliff that rises about 1,000 feet above the surrounding country. On one side lies the valley of Santa Fe River, and on the other, the valley of the Santa Clara. About 600 feet up the cliff is a broad shelf which likely served as a home to the cliff dwellers. Many centuries ago, in the soft pumice stone, they hollowed out family dwellings, gradually turning the shelters into a vast network of rooms. As the settlements expanded, room after room was carved out until the cliff caves formed a dense warren of habitations. I hate how they write these like tongue twisters, you know what I mean? It's like hard as hell to read this out loud and not take deep gasps for air every 2 seconds. Walls were built beneath the overhang to extend the living space and protect the people from weather and enemies. No contact with the cliff shelters gone. The inhabitants also built upward onto the mesa above. About 400 feet higher still, they constructed a communal village. The mesa is roughly 3/4 of a mile wide and 1.5 long, with steep cliffs on all sides and excellent natural defenses. On its edge stood a granite watchtower that Dr. Cole believed may have once reached a height of 60 feet. Because the nearest granite source was far away, the stone blocks had to be carried up the immense cliff by hand. On the lofty platform remains the ruins of 2 communal dwellings, one evidently older than the other. The older building has not yet been explored, and Dr. Cole says his own excavation amounted to little more than a surface examination. He estimates that the larger structure originally contained at least 600 rooms and perhaps as many as 2,000, measuring about 240 by 300 feet. It was built of stone blocks about 6 by 6 by 15 inches, quarried from the cliffs below and hauled upward by the workers. The rooms were rooted with timber and the walls were later raised higher. At the center was a large courtyard used as a common kitchen, from which the many rooms radiated outward. As the settlement grew, the structure expanded until it became 3 stories high, with rooms extending 12 deep from the central court and smaller courts scattered throughout the complex. Dr. Cole estimates that the population may have averaged about 3 people per room, giving a total of roughly 4,800 to 6,000 residents, not counting those who lived on the cliff caves. Dr. Cole has turned his parlor into an anthropological display, filled with the trophies of his summer excavations. One table is covered with water jars and incense pipes. Another is piled with stone axes, mortars, pestles, weaving shuttles, and pottery. A second table displays skulls and crossbones. While the rest of the skeletons wait to be assembled, scattered around the room are bows and arrows, baskets, twigs woven into watertight containers with pitch, modern Indian pottery, photographs, and even a piece of petrified wood. The skulls are especially prized. Dr. Cole points to one he calls the Gigantus and notes that she lacks incisors in front, having grinders all around. He believes this is evidence that the people were grain eaters rather than meat eaters. He also observes that these skulls have high foreheads, suggesting intelligence, but are flattened at the back in a curious way. There you have, again, another account of these flattened skulls, just like was mentioned in Teotihuacan, and like I mentioned earlier in the reports of other mound builder sites, you have them in the cliff dwellers. Okay, so the one skull he calls the Gigantus, and he believes that she has grinders all around, and he believes these people were grain eaters. So the question is where to mark this. Santa Clara Canyon near Espanola, New Mexico. Okay, that's New Mexico, Santa Clara Canyon. Okay, and he called her the Gigantus, I believe. All right, got it. That was a long one. That had a lot of interesting information in it, but man, that story was super long. Very tall people, and he believes it was a female, and they were found in the cliff dwellings. Let's see if there's any images of the... I got a name here. Puye cliff dwellings, supposed to be in that same era. You got to remember these stories or when these things were discovered. So they had no name. So I have no idea what the name was. But it might be this place. This is probably it. Same general area. Look at that. Wow. What are all these holes for? They must have had like logs coming out like a building or something. In the story, it did say that it says one structure contained at least 600 rooms and perhaps as many as 2,000, measuring 240 by 300 feet, and was built of stone blocks about 6 by 6 by 15 inches, quarried from the cliffs above and hauled upward. And then it said there was a stone tower and all types of stuff. So, you know what's crazy is I would have never heard of this location if it weren't for reading through these archive reports. I had no idea this existed. So this is probably it, huh? Stone blocks. And he estimated that roughly 4,800 to 6,000 residents, not counting those who lived in the cliff caves. Wow. Well, I don't know for a fact that this is the right place, but it's pretty dang close to the story. Look at that. That is freaking huge. Wow. The foundation's still standing to this day, huh? That is pretty damn cool. Look at that. Whoa. The rafters still in there. Might be new ones, but man. Pulque cliff dwellings. Never heard of this before. See, this is why I do this. This is why I go through these old reports. Because the stories themselves are fascinating. But what happens usually is I start going through these and then I read about something and I'm like, what's that? I do a search and it's something that just blows my mind I've never heard of before, which leads me down a totally different rabbit hole. And so I started marking these down. I had a list of so many of them. I started putting them down in my notes. And now I've got like thousands and thousands of them that I want to make videos about. I just don't have enough time. Like, for instance, this is why this is a compilation of a bunch of stories all together, because I just don't have enough time to do this many. So I just put them all together and make one large video about them all. Wow, look at that. Now, I bet you if someone were to check, these are probably solstice and equinox alignments in these buildings. Very cool. Anyways, giant skeleton found in that area. I put the giantess over there, but maybe it was found over here. It's pretty close. We'll live. Okay, going on to the next story here. Image 7 of the Weekly Journal, Minor, Prescott, Arizona, October 18, 1911. And our story is titled, Refuses to Sell the Skeleton of a Giant. This was an interesting story because I believe I found a follow-up article that was written maybe a week or two after the original. Peter Marks of Walnut Creek, discoverer of the skeleton of a prehistoric human giant on his farm several weeks ago while in the city yesterday, stated that the curiosity is attracting such deep interest in scientific circles that he is almost deluged with letters, and during the past 2 weeks has been visited by Mr. and Mrs. Shoup, the former an attaché of the Smithsonian Institute. Wow, their name shows up again. At Washington, who made the long journey especially for the purpose of viewing the frame of the giant of other days. Mr. Shoup was provided with photographic instruments, and he took several pictures of the freak. So where are those pictures at? I would love to see those. He also desired to take it back to Washington, but this request was held up by Mr. Marks until later, and after he assertions whether Arizona desires it for its probable state museum. In that event, it will be donated. Mr. Marks stating that as the subject was found in this territory, it should be kept here. Mr. Shoup was very much interested in those portions of the human frame that were intact, particularly the skull, which indicated that the giant was of such abnormal size as to be beyond comprehension as that of a human being. Mr. Marks has uncovered another Aztec burial ground near the point where the skeleton was found, but the skeletons dug up here are of normal size and attract but little attention, only a small number being found. An old irrigation ditch has also been partially uncovered, and it is Mr. Shoup's belief that the place was intelligently cultivated in some past age by an industrious people. Mr. Marks has uncovered many implements, some of which are unique in construction, and for what purpose they were utilized is problematical. Okay, so here we have again another article which mentions that people from the Smithsonian showed up and wanted to take the bones. Says, during the past weeks, has been visited by Mr. and Mrs. Shoup, the former an attaché of the Smithsonian Institute. Let's look them up. Mr. and Mrs. Shoup. Yes, that clears the context up. You were referring to a well-known historical narrative involving Mr. and Mrs. Shoup, who frequently cited in historical newspaper archives and alternative archaeology discussions regarding the discovery of anomalous skeletons. In these specific accounts, it's tied to blah, 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 the account, the conflict, finding records. If you're looking to trace these exact documents, no, I don't want those documents. I want to know who those people are. What did they do for the Smithsonian? Never actually existed as real employees or archaeologists for the Smithsonian Institute because they are not real historical figures. You will not find them listed on any official fictional representatives, and then blah blah blah. Okay, so now they're fictional characters. Such bullshit. You know why I say that? Because the head of the Bureau of Ethnology, John Wesley Powell, himself reported finding giant skeletons in burial mounds, specifically in Iowa.
John Wesley Powell, head of the Smithsonian Institution's Bureau of Ethnology and a Civil War veteran and explorer, oversaw mound investigations in the late 19th century. In 1897, Smithsonian Director John Wesley Powell reported a 7'6" skeleton in an Iowa mound, adorned with a bear-tooth necklace and copper beads. The bones crumbled upon exposure.
So, these, I can't stand the programming on these AIs. Anyways, so for some reason, in 1911, the newspapers came up with a conspiracy theory, is what we're supposed to believe, and decided to choose the Smithsonian as the center of their conspiracy theory and say that the Smithsonian came to take the bones of these giants. Why would the papers say that? Wouldn't the Smithsonian contact them and be like, hey, why are you making up lies about us? It makes no sense, especially because I have the Smithsonian reports right underneath the camera right now, and I've read through them. There's tons of giant skeleton reports. So I know that AI is just repeating bullshit. Anyways, Mr. and Mrs. Shoup, the former an attaché from the Smithsonian Institute of Washington, made the long journey and basically wanted to take the bones. Let's mark this down on our map. Walnut Creek in Arizona. Okay, and how big did it say the skeleton was? Alright, so been visited by Mr. and Mrs. Shoop. Viewing the frame, was provided photographs, instruments, and took several pictures of the freak. He also desired to take it to Washington, but the request was held up. So I like that this guy wanted to keep the bones in his own state. The bones should stay in the areas that they came from in the local museums, but unfortunately we know that the Smithsonian went to great lengths. That's why they're mentioned in all these different stories, to bring these bones back to Washington. And unfortunately, they're not for the public to view, because we have all these reports, yet we can't see any of them. I've been to the Smithsonian many times. None of these are on display. And even if they weren't, just because it's out of respect, at least have them cataloged in a book where it says, oh yeah, we do have possession of this one or that one, and it was found here or there. But yeah, I really wish all of these would have stayed in the areas that they're from. I've read other reports like that, like this one from Iowa, where they said specifically they wanted to keep it in Iowa and not to a museum in the East. So the skull indicated that the giant was a abnormal size beyond comprehension. Uncovered another Aztec burial ground to the point where the skeleton was found, and all of those skeletons. So as far as we know, the Aztecs, according to our understanding, weren't in the present-day United States, but their own mythology says they came from the north. I've posted before the Hidalgo Treaty Map. I believe that's what it's called. It shows the ancient home of the Aztecs. Let me show you this. Okay, so right here. The myth, magic, and Aztlan. So this map, I believe it was given to the United States by Mexico after the Mexican-American War, if I remember that correctly. And in the area around Salt Lake City, Utah, it says Antigua Residencia de los Aztecas, ancient residence of the Aztecs, which is pretty interesting because it never showed up on a map again after that. And maybe that map was wrong, who knows. The other interesting thing is that I found a story about an Aztec manuscript that was discovered in Fairfield, Iowa. And it's probably, to me, the most interesting story I've ever found.
In 1997, a man in Iowa unearthed the fifth known Aztec manuscript in existence, the only one ever found in the USA. Today, it has vanished. According to all of the reports I read, the last institution known to hold this priceless artifact was the Smithsonian. Here's the story. On September 2nd, 1897, in the town of Fairfield, Iowa, a laborer named J.T. Griffith made an extraordinary discovery that would echo across the world of archaeology. While working a routine job with the city waterworks, Griffith was excavating an open prairie at the edge of town when he unearthed what looked like an ordinary chunk of wood. It appeared simple at first, coated in a layer of pitch and partially buried around 3 feet below the surface, measuring about 1 foot long, 8 inches wide, and roughly 5 to 6 inches thick. But when Griffith struck it with his pick, the wood split open, revealing a hollowed cavity inside. Nestled within was a tightly rolled piece of birch bark marked with unfamiliar symbols. They were vivid red hieroglyphics, striking in color and preserved in remarkable condition. Griffith, recognizing this was no ordinary object, decided to keep it safe and intact. The manuscript consisted of 3 fragmented pieces of thin birch bark, between 3 and 4 inches long and about 2 to 3 inches wide. Though some of the edges had broken away, parts. In 1897, a man in Iowa manuscript in existence.
Okay, that was the short version, the real version of that video. The guy found it in Iowa, then he brought it to a local history lover. She brought it to a professor from the University of Chicago in Illinois. He brought it to someone who specialized in Mesoamerican studies, who confirmed it was legit. It was of the correct age. It was Aztec, but he didn't specialize in actual Aztec language. And so then it was brought to another professor at the University of Ohio, who confirmed it as well. So that was 3 different professors who confirmed it to be legit. And the story ended by saying that it would be sent to the Smithsonian for further study. And then after the Smithsonian was done with it, they were going to send it back to the University of Ohio, where it would be put on display in Orton Hall. So I went to look it up and couldn't find anything about it. But here it was in this article, confirmed by all these different professors from universities as being an actual Aztec manuscript that had been discovered in Iowa. So that's why this story is interesting to me. It says that they found an Aztec burial ground. Maybe it wasn't, maybe it was, but it is an interesting coincidence. And then it says that they found irrigation ditches and etc. So that's pretty interesting. Let's put this on the map and let's go back to our map. Walnut Creek, Arizona. Okay. Giant of Walnut Creek. Okay. Got that. Now, let's see what the map's looking like. Okay. The Grand Canyon Giant. I think I covered this a little bit earlier in that one story. Yeah, we did. 40 miles from Flagstaff, Arizona, Hull, the guide, has unearthed the petrified skeleton of a man who he estimated to have been at least 17 feet high. Later in the story, it says that it wasn't that tall, based on the gap between strides, but still was over normal height for a human. Says the outlines of the body were perfect. Hull did not turn the fossil over to make accurate measurements. He and the old Indian studied the stone skeleton for 10 minutes and then returned to the trail. Near Hull, found perfect footprints of the giant imprinted in stone. Their distance apart showed his stride to have been at least 5 feet. This would, however, indicate a height of not over 10 or 11 feet when Hull returned to Flagstaff. So you could say if the story is accurate and true and it wasn't mastodon prints or something, it was actual human skeleton, it would still be well over normal height. So the story said it was where? 40 miles outside of Flagstaff? 40 miles from Flagstaff, Arizona. So let's mark this down. 10 or 11 foot tall. Okay, got it. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Look at that. Okay. Going back now to our story. Okay, this was a follow-up to that Walnut Creek story. Says Peter Marks of Walnut Creek, now in the city with a load of fruit, says he is annoyed by the skepticism surrounding his report of the discovery of a giant skeleton, likely from Aztec times. He explains that since the story was first published a few weeks ago, he has received letters from all over the country, many of which question the truth. Marks reports that the giant skeleton, as recovered from the ground, is now stored away. He insists that there's no doubt that the individual was an extraordinary specimen of the human race. Although he has only part of the frame of its possession, he claims that it is enough to establish an accurate dimensions of the man. Truly exceptional stature from head to foot. In fact, he says it can be verified by anyone who wishes to examine the remains. He further states that since the original discovery, many additional objects have been unearthed, convincing him that this was a progressive people skilled in various crafts. Among the finds are crude implements, and in one case, inscribed states that he believes point to some form of education. Mark says he intends to bring what remains of the huge skeleton into the city in the near future so that the public can see it for themselves and draw their own conclusions. Okay, well, that's interesting, him arguing that it is real. Now, here's a story from Texas that I found that was really interesting. It doesn't mention any giant bones, but it does talk about a prehistoric flood. So, September 23rd, 1900, from the Image 9 of the Times from Washington, D.C. Texas prehistoric flood. Evidence suggests that long before written history, the Texas coast was struck by a catastrophic flood that wiped out an entire coastal population. Evidence suggests that long before written history, the Texas coast was struck by a catastrophic flood that wiped out an entire coastal population, much like the recent disaster at Galveston, but separated from it by thousands of years. The story begins with a chance discovery made near Galveston, Texas, during excavations to gather artifacts for archaeological exhibit at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo. Workers digging near Clear Creek in Galveston County uncovered human bones in an area geologists say was once covered by the waters of the Gulf of Mexico. As the dig expanded, it became clear that they had stumbled onto the mass dead of an unknown prehistoric people. The first find came when the railroad excavations turned up a skull, fragments, and teeth in a shovel of earth. Closer inspection revealed entire skeletons, many of them grouped together, as well as ivory, beads, and other handmade objects. Realizing the scientific importance of the site, a more systematic investigation followed. Thousands of skeletons were ultimately exposed. In just one portion of the work, 1,500 skeletons were counted, and it was believed that many more remained. The bones lay in a bank of shell, gravel, and sand, about 30 acres in extent, made up of several distinct layers. These layers of strata were each a few inches thick and separated by bands of silt or earth. Live oaks now grow over the topsoil, making it one of the last places anyone would expect to find remains of an ancient population. The position and condition of the body showed that this was not an ordinary cemetery. The skeletons were not laid out in orderly rows, but were found in chaotic heaps. Some were lying on their backs, others face down, and many on their sides. It was rare to find a single skeleton alone. More often 2 or 3, and sometimes as many as 14, were found together, as if families or groups had died where they stood or huddled. This jumbled arrangement strongly suggested sudden death in a single overwhelming event, followed by rapid covering with debris rather than careful burial. From the investigations concluded that a great natural disaster, probably a tidal wave or massive coastal flood, had swept over a populous settlement along the ancient Gulf shoreline. At that time, the sea is believed to have extended farther inland than it does today. The cataclysm likely drowned thousands in a single episode, their bodies afterwards buried under layers of shell, sand, and silt. Details of the skeletons added further interest. Many skulls were large, and the teeth were heavily worn from hard food, yet showed no trace of decay, a sharp contrast with the frequent dental disease among more recent peoples. No children's skeletons were identified, possibly because their more fragile bones had long since disintegrated. Ivory beads about 1/4 of an inch in diameter and up to 2 inches long, pierced and grooved along their length, were found, some of the remains hinting at personal adornment and a degree of craftsmanship. The sheer number of skeletons and their close spacing imply that this was once a dense, organized community, not a scattered band of nomads. The people who lived here appear to have had social structure, permanent dwellings, and some level of civilization, modern in a prehistoric sense. Through long-vanished people before the era of the historic tribes known in Texas. Writers drew a parallel to Pompeii and Herculaneum, where Roman cities were suddenly buried by the eruption of Vesuvius and later uncovered with buildings, tools, and human bodies preserved beneath the volcanic ash. In a similar way, the Texas coastal people seem to have been overtaken in a single night by water rather than by fire, their existence sealed away beneath marine deposits for countless years. By striking coincidence, the secret of the ancient flood was brought to light just before another devastating storm and flood struck Galveston in modern times. As thousands of prehistoric dead were being unearthed for study and display, a new tidal disaster was about to claim thousands more lives in the same general region. Now, as the remains of that forgotten race go on view at the exposition, they silently testify to an earlier convolution of nature that obliterated a people who never knew the civilization that would one day rediscover them. Wow. So that's a really interesting story. Again, I'd never heard this story before going through and reading through these archives. I didn't know there was evidence of an ancient, Noah's Ark basically in Texas, but it did say that the skulls were large and the teeth were perfect, and I found that in tons of mound builder reports. Maybe these people were mound builders, maybe not, I don't know, but this is really interesting because I've never heard of this before. So let's ask Google about this. Yes, the catastrophic hurricane that struck Galveston, Texas, September 8, 1900 is the deadliest. No, this is way before that. I guarantee you it's going to say, this is just a made-up story. The prehistoric skeletons discovered near Galveston around 1900 were identified as indigenous remains from a shell bank along Clear Creek, with many artifacts shipped to the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. The burial site was largely destroyed by industrial excavation for a railroad ballast, with many bones lost to development. For more on the initial report, see blah blah blah. So basically, all it did was just repeat what information I just gave it. So this isn't even like in its database. That's kind of important. We know for a fact not for a fact. We have this report that thousands of people were freaking wiped out in an instant in a flood in Texas. That should be something that's, probably mentioned in history class. Just kind of good to know, you know what I mean? It says along Clear Creek, Galveston, Texas. Let's look that up. Let's put that on our map. It says Clear Creek. Okay, let's put that there. Done. Okay. Is this Galveston? Yes, it is. Okay. Clear Creek, it probably, if it's a creek, where is it? Right here. I imagine it goes all the way to the coast, but we have evidence of an ancient flood in Clear Creek. Okay, moving on to the next story. This one is definitely a sensational report. Like, I don't believe this story, but I'll read it anyways, and who knows, maybe I'm wrong. An 18-foot giant near Seymour. If the report that the fossilized skeleton of a giant 18 feet tall has been found near Seymour, Texas is true, it is the most important ethnological discovery ever made in the world. Remarked by Dr. J.E. Pierce, professional of anthropology at the University of Texas. It would shatter all previous records for giants by nearly 10 feet, as the tallest man known to the anthropological research measured only 8 feet 5 inches. While it seems improbable to me that the bones unearthed near Seymour belong to a human being, I shall investigate the reported discovery. Despite Dr. Pierce's skepticism about the authenticity of the relic from a bygone age, the skeleton is now in the possession of W.J. McKinney, the oil prospector who found it. Numerous witnesses have examined it and vouched for its extraordinary size, attributing it to a previously unknown race. McKinney, deeply intrigued by his find, uncovered the fossilized remains near the surface while excavating on the narrow watershed between Brazos and Wichita River. Okay, that's our location. In his account, McKinney wrote, I estimate that the man weighed between 1,000 and 1,500 pounds. According to my deductions, he lived about 2,100 years ago. The skull is 6 times the size of an ordinary man. He did not detail how he arrived at these figures regarding the giant's era or build. The bones may soon be donated to the Smithsonian Institution, which under Dr. J. Walter Fuchs is conducting anthropological research in Texas. Interesting that it mentions him, because I have Dr. Fewkes. I have read his name in all types of other burial mound reports and giant skeleton reports. I know his name's come up several times before. That's just a side note. Okay, Fuchs is conducting anthropological research in Texas. Professor Roy Redcheck of the University of Texas, currently excavating Indian mounds near Round Oak, added that such a discovery, if verified, would usher in a new era of study. It would require further research to determine whether this 18-foot man from prehistoric times belonged to a distinct race or was merely a freak among people of average size. That's an interesting story. It does seem a little ridiculous, 18 feet, but it's what's even more interesting is that, again, the Smithsonian's name comes up. So Brazos and Wichita River. And where is this? I know it's in Texas somewhere. The Brazos River, called the Rio de los Brazos by early Spanish explorer, in the 14th longest river in the United States. We'll put it by the Brazos and he said by another river too, but we'll just put it here for now. 18-foot skeleton. All right. It's kind of interesting that it looks like that river might run just right over to our last story, Galveston. Huh. How about it? Okay. All right. And now I got one from Florida. Actually, I got a bunch from Florida, but I just put one on my list. If you go to my page, Cryptid Camp, type in Florida Giants. From what I've been told by people who know more than I do, the states with the most giant reports in America, number 1 being Ohio, number 2 being Indiana, number 3 being Florida, and number 4 being California. So Florida's got tons of reports. I'll just bring you to one and we'll mark it on the map and see where it shows up. Okay, Florida, 1925, finds giant's bones. Boca Grande, Florida, discovery of a skull 1/4 larger than that of a normal modern, together with bones indicating a probable height of not less than 7 feet, led to speculation over theories of a great giant race believed to have inhabited Florida before the coming of the Spaniards. So let's mark that on the map. It said, 7 feet? Boca Grande, Florida, 7 feet. Oh, look at that. Kind of like in the same spot as Goat Island over there on our last story. They seem to have, this kind of, it's like almost like the same thing. Like, imagine this is San Francisco, and remember there was that little island, Goat Island, like right in the middle. This is kind of like very similar. And then it said there was one on the peninsula south of San Francisco. So let's look at our map now, because I could go and find you some more. Okay, for instance, let's go here. Florida Giant Cryptic Camp. Okay, Florida Giants. Tampa, Florida. Giant Indians who roamed Florida swamps 500 years ago, living on what shell mounds which they cracked with their teeth. The picture unfolded by archaeologists who have delved into the burial ground on the Gulf Island near here. Near Tampa. Let me see if I can get a closer look at this. All right, let's go back. Let's go to Tampa, Florida, Gulf Island. Are there any islands? Okay, so there's one. But knowing from our other stories, I wouldn't be surprised from, for instance, San Francisco. It was like something right here. It might have been one of those, or it might be that. Let's just put it over here. Tampa Giant. Okay. This was an interesting story I did from Florida. First Americans may have lived in Florida. Remarkable new fossil find near Palm Beach. Smithsonian institutions tend to prove that the flowery peninsula was inhabited by humans 200,000 years ago, and man not a recent arrival in the New World. In the early days, the glyptodon, a turtle-like mammal, roamed the Florida wilderness. It weighed a half-ton. Okay, anyways, that was an interesting story. Here's those circular burials I was talking about, like have been found in Mexico and also in the Mississippi and Ohio Valley. Oh, the Miami Circle. This is an interesting thing. The Miami Circle is a prehistoric archaeological site carved directly into limestone bedrock in the mouth of the Miami River in downtown Miami, Florida. I don't think anyone knows what the hell that is. This was another interesting report from Florida. Look at this one. Weeden Island, Florida. Archaeologists uncover an intriguing mix of human remains within its ancient mounds. Among them are two starkly different types of skeletons, some displaying large square jaws, thick, robust bones, while others are slender and fine-boned with narrow faces and pointed chins. These physical contrasts hint at a more than one distinct group having once occupied the same site. Excavations also reveal two distinct styles of pottery, further deepening the mystery. Some of the vessels are even bear molded human faces, kind of like the Arkansas death masks, eerily lifelike, as if preserving visage long lost to time. Could these be the so-called death mask bowls, often associated with ritual or burial practices? But look at, they took some pictures of some of the skeletons. You can see this one does look maybe a little more robust. That was an interesting one, but I'm trying to show you some of these giant skeleton reports from Florida. I know I've posted tons of them. Oh, I found another California giant story. This one was a good one. San Nicolas Island, California. We're going to add this to the map. See, you see what I mean? I've only put some of the stories that I have found in this script. There's many more we could add to this map. Golgotha of the Pacific, an island covers with old human bones. Extinct race of vertebral giants, capture of the sole survivor of this ancient race that inhabited San Nicolas Islands. I remember this. I think it's a long story. It is. Look at that. It was actually really sad, and it talked about this very last person that lived there, and they tried to bring her to the mainland, and she didn't want to go, and they left her. And then someone came back years later, and she was still there, and then they brought her to the mainland, and I'm pretty sure she ended up like dying or something. Hold on. San Nicolas Island for the investigations. The general opinion is that the physique of the Indian race that swarmed over the islands then was very much larger than that of any civilized races of today, and that some of them must have been 7 feet 3 inches tall. The skulls of this extinct tribe often measure several inches more than some of the skulls of today. Many skulls found lying about on the island show that their possessors must have suffered death from a club or a blunt battle axe. No one has yet found a skull on San Nicolas that shows marks of a bullet. Man, I would love to read this story to you. It's really interesting, but it's super long. Let's just put San Nicolas Island. Got it. Okay. So now I've gone through a good amount of reports here, and this video is already very long. So let's take a look at what we got now after reading all these reports. Remember, the theme was Mexican giant reports, right? We even have some down here. Okay, let's start in the north. So we have in 1524, Sandoval sees a race of giants. In San Francisco, we got 3 different locations. We got this one in West Berkeley, this one on Goat Island, and then this one on this side. And it was what? Enormous. Oh, it's this one was excavated by a professor at Stanford. He said it was in an old Indian mound. Okay, so coming down the Pacific coast, you got, look at that. It's like this piece of land in the middle and on the other side. That's really interesting. Okay, and then down here in Malibu, but before San Nicolas Island, you have the Golgotha of the Pacific story that I just read. It's not too far from the coast. I mean, I say that from Google Earth, but I'm sure that's one hell of a paddle. I can't imagine doing that. What is this island? I don't know what this is. Isn't that so-called alien base right off the coast of Malibu? Isn't this it right here somewhere? Yeah, I thought there was that underwater alien base was right off of the coast of like Malibu somewhere right around here. And supposedly there's like pillars and stuff. I don't know about that, but it is just an interesting coincidence. Anyways, you got the 7 to 8 foot tall skeletons that were found on the beach over in Malibu. And then, let's say, it looks like there's a line right there. Let's say the people, if you were here and you were to cut across the land, maybe something could be found here. But you have the Giant of Walnut Creek, Arizona. And then you have the 10 to 11 foot tall giant. Was that the one? What is? Oh, this is the one 40 miles from Flagstaff, I believe. That must be Flagstaff somewhere over here. Yep. So we don't know the exact position of this one, but somewhere 40 miles and one. It doesn't say what direction it was. But this is out in the middle of nowhere. And it's kind of matches the description that he gave, so it's possible it was around that area. And then you had this one, which was in that amazing freaking Adobe style city right over here that we were looking at earlier, the Gigantus. They said with a bunch of chewing teeth. And then this one, I really doubt, possible giant. I think it was likely a mastodon on Mesa Rica or something like that. It said that the chest was like 8 foot across or some crazy like that. Okay, but there does appear to be a line. And then if you keep following, the 18-foot skeletons over here by the this is that other one in Texas, 18-footer that I doubt is most likely a mastodon or something. Who knows? Because there are, like, the further you go back in time, the larger the giant reports seem to get. Like, if you look at some of the European accounts from, like, Rome, Italy, etc., there's some gigantic, huge skeletons that were reported. But they're probably Ice Age, animals, megafauna. Then you have evidence of the ancient flood in Galveston that wiped out some people. Okay, and then in northern Mexico, you have that elongated skull that we just found while searching on Google. And on that same river, just north, you have the 8 foot tall skeletons and the children who were even 6'6", I believe it said. Okay, and then you got one right out here in the middle of freaking nowhere. In the desert, 10 to 12 foot tall skeletons. Oh, is that Teotihuacan? No, that's not it. Yep, out in the middle of nowhere out there. 10 foot tall skeleton over here somewhere. Kind of looks like those Nazca lines, but they're just roads. Okay, and then yeah, we got those. And then you got Teotihuacan, strange flat skulls. Look at that. I have heard that the pyramids, this is a theory some guy said, were aligned to magnetic north during their time period, and that's another way you can date pyramids. I don't think that's right, but this one is not to the north. That is okay. Anyways, this is true north right here. so it's a little bit off, but Teotihuacan, flat skulls. And then you had in Ixtapalapa, there was I didn't mark down how tall the skeleton was. Another giant report. Okay. Any connection between these two? Any rivers that connect them or anything? And then you had one in Veracruz that was ridiculous, like 30 feet or something like that. What are these? Probably cartel runways. Not even supposed to be looking at these. Fentanyl warehouses. Anyway, and okay. And then going into the Yucatan, you had the 9-foot skeleton in urns in this. It said it was in this city. That's all we know. Progreso, if I remember correctly. And then the Navapache giant legend that laid on the tracks at night to trip people. We don't know that it was right there, somewhere in the Yucatan. I think this is Cancun right there. Yep, I've been there. And then if you keep following the coastline, you had the tribe of giants and the island of Puna in the Gulf of Guayaquil. I think this must be Ecuador. And then down here in Peru, in Chancol, I believe, it said 30 miles north of Lima. You had giant human skeletons there. And I'm sure there's many, many more. But maybe I'll save this map, because usually I delete these afterwards. But this is kind of interesting, because look at, you got a circle around the Gulf. I mean, you already know this whole area is absolutely covered in them. People always say, where are the Mexican giants? Well, here they are. And there's probably many, many more. And there's probably a lot that just didn't get reported at all. If I find a giant skeleton, I wouldn't want to report that. So imagine how many just never got mentioned. It does seem like there's kind of like a line here, you know what I mean? It could just all be coincidence. Anyways, that's it for today's episode. Thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. If you like this episode and this information, trust me, I got a lot more planned. This is the type of things I can do after I collect so many of these articles. I can put together these comparison videos, which is what I like to do to see if any of these stories can corroborate each other independently. So, thanks for watching, guys. If you're watching on Spotify, please give me a 5-star review to help me boost through the ratings. And if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, whatever, hit the like, subscribe, comment, anything to help boost this video and my channel. Thank you so much, guys. Keep camping and exploring the mysteries of our world.